Welcome friends to Granny's GodPod number 47, talking about who chose the books of the New Testament. It's obvious to anyone who studies history that Christianity and the Bible have played an enormous role in the history of Western culture. Why Christianity and not Islam, Judaism, Hinduism or atheism? My favourite atheist is fond of telling me that Constantine chose the books of the New Testament at the Council of Nicaea in AD 325, which is not helped by Dan Brown, the author of the Da Vinci Code, saying it was collated by the pagan Roman Emperor Constantine the Great. Others will say, actually it was Athanasius, Bishop of Alexandria, who listed the 27 books of the New Testament in AD 367. But listing is not choosing, nor is it authorizing, nor does it account for what happened in the years between Jesus' death and the 4th and 5th century Romanized Catholic Christianity. Archaeological evidence has found more Gospels than the 4 we have, with possibly around 10 others circulating in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. But these were not circulated as much as the canonical Gospels. The differences between the canonical and non-canonical are telling. The style of the copyist's handwriting, and the fact that the non-canonical were mostly on scrolls, while the canonical were in codex or book form, point to the fact that some were for more private reading than public use. Careful handwriting, standard codex size, and readers' aids such as paragraphs and punctuation set the New Testament manuscripts apart from the rest. These papyri are dated from before the establishment of Christianity in the 4th century, and all come from Egypt. Historians of early Christianity recognise that Egypt was the hotbed of its alternative Gospels, and Bart Ehrman agrees the early Christians in Egypt were various kinds of Gnostic. Even here the canonical Gospels outnumber the rest 4-1, and that, together with their distinctive characteristics, make it difficult to believe that a political choice influenced the canon. It is often alleged that it was simply widespread use that chose the canon, but the early church also regarded the New Testament scriptures as apostolic, that is, written by an apostle or an associate of an apostle. Orthodox, that is, in accordance with the rest of the scriptures and the church's creeds, and as Catholic, that is, recognised broadly across the churches. Despite this, there is no record in ancient writings of any lists or discussions of criteria. If it was down to pure choice, would the Church have chosen those books with dire warnings and condemnations, like Paul's letters to the Corinthians? One of the most popular writings in the early Church was The Shepherd of Hermas, for which more fragments exist than many New Testament books. Yet while Irenaeus saw it as useful but not scripture, Tertullian condemned it as apocryphal and false. This lack of consensus suggests there was no set criteria in use. To say that the Church chose the books of the New Testament suggests the Church assumed greater authority than Scripture, which challenges the notion that they are God-given. In the 2nd and early 3rd centuries, well before the historian can speak of a final consensus or any centralised church hierarchy, Christian thinkers came to believe that the New Testament was backed up by the Old Testament and the prophets, and that the scripture was self-attesting when the Spirit gave ears to hear. Near the end of the 2nd century, Clement of Alexandria speaks of God and Scripture as a first principle, something that is true by necessity, even without logical proofs. An anonymous 2nd or 3rd century author says, "The word of truth is free and carries its own authority." And Origen, writing in AD 246 against Celsus, a 2nd century pagan opponent of Christianity, says, "The gospel has a demonstration of its own, more divine than any established by Grecian dialectics." That's the art of investigating the truth of opinions. And this diviner method is called by the Apostle Paul the demonstration of the Spirit and of power. How could people who think of Scripture as the self-demonstrating voice of God take it upon themselves to judge which books were useful to be treated as Scripture and which not? The collections of new Scriptures used by Clement of Alexandria and Irenaeus of Lyon, used in the late 2nd century, on opposite sides of the Mediterranean, suggest that a consensus had emerged before the 4th century. Origen gave a list in his homilies on Joshua of the 27 books that correspond to ours, though the original Greek document is lost. And these collections did not simply materialize at that time. The early ecclesiastical writers acknowledged the books had been handed down to them from the earliest times. The churches had inherited them through chains of Christian leaders that might be only a few links away from the apostles. Even Celsus accepted that the Gospels went back to Jesus' apostles. The alternative Gospels of the Gnostics didn't deny this, but began their Gospels by alleging they were secret sayings, which actually must mean there were public words already known. Let's then bust some myths. The books of the New Testament were not chosen by Constantine, his generals, or the bishops attending the Council of Nicaea in AD 325. Neither individuals nor councils created the canon. The 27 books were not chosen, but inherited. Charles Hill says, "The 2nd century churches saw themselves as the favoured recipients, preservers, and proclaimers of the life-giving message God had given to the world in Jesus Christ. They believed that Jesus, just as the Gospels and Acts portrayed it, had entrusted the message God had given to a definite group of apostles, which ultimately became the source of a new set of books." William Barclay said, "The New Testament books became canonical because no one could stop them doing so." And Jesus simply said, "My sheep hear my voice." Thanks for listening. That's all for now. See you next time.